Welcome back. I'm Dr. Roger Marson. This is part 5 of our TicTacToe analysis model videos. This is a necessary evolution of SWOT analysis tool. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get straight to it. Today we're going to be talking about the external analysis or the industry analysis, depending on how you want to say it, but we'll get straight to it. Again, watch the first few videos so you understand where these cells are in the overall 3x3 matrix. So let's go into the external circumstances. It'd be the top row, the middle, and the right-hand cell. These are current external favorable circumstances and current external unfavorable circumstances. The only difference between the two are some are favorable, some are unfavorable. Now we use the term, the index numbers EF and EU just to mean external favorable, external unfavorable, and a number of them 1 through whatever. Now, the number that you need to have as a general rule is at least about, if you're going to do it right and do it well, about 20 per list. However, if you do have that many, that's too many for the rest of the analysis. But I said use that many to come up with them. Only to do a complete and full job. You'll need to use the EFE matrix to narrow, or the EFE analysis, to narrow these down to a list of about 10 or 12 or 15 per list. Now, for my MBA students, yeah, I would require you to have more. For my undergraduate students, yeah, less. My master's in management, I require 11 favorables and 11 unfavorables as a general rule, but that's 1 per factor on the 2 input models that we use. And the input models would be the Pestel and the Porter's 5 forces model. Between the two, there's 11 factors, so I want 1 for each factor favorable, 1 for each factor unfavorable. And we'll do the same thing with the internals when the time comes. So let's just get straight to it. Now, one of the problems was this external circumstances favorable. We used to call that opportunities. And because conversational English is such that we use the word opportunity to describe something you can choose to do. I have the opportunity to go to school. I have the opportunity to do this. Or we have the opportunity to do this. Because of that, it doesn't work with SWOT anymore. The definitions have changed. So we have to say this up front. Do not list any past, present, or future action of any competitor or the industry or anything as a whole in these 2 cells. This has nothing to do with actions. Okay? These are not output actions. Now, you can say that so-and-so company is pursuing this product or pursuing this particular thing, but the problem is not that they're pursuing that. The problem is the effect of that or why they're doing it. For example, let's say that this company is pursuing a green product instead of a blue product. Well, ask yourself, why are they doing that? Well, the problem is people are demanding green products instead of blue products. That is your actual circumstance. People are demanding so-and-so instead of so-and-so. Now, if you don't have that, that'd be bad. If you do have that, that'd be good. Don't say, we found out that this company is doing so-and-so. Like in electric vehicles, you might think that, well, this company is pursuing so-and-so. True. And you're not. True. But it doesn't go here. It goes over on the internal side where you would say, we are worse than that company in terms of pursuing new battery technology. Be very careful that you don't use this as a place to list ongoing actions. Remember, things here have to apply to the industry as a whole or to nearly all of those you compete against. That's what goes here, not just 1 or 2 of them. Each circumstance must be currently true. Now, the technical way to phrase these is not in the perfect present tense. In grammar, perfect present means something is true. It's always true. It's always the case. But it may not be the case right now. So we have a tense of English grammar called present continuous instead of present perfect. Here's an example. When you know the law of economics, because most of you should have at least a basic understanding of economics, that when prices go up, demand goes down. When consumer prices go up, demand goes down. That's true. That's always true. Problem is, prices might not be going up today. When prices go down, as a rule, demand goes up. That's a fact. But right now, today being October the 12th, 2022, we have pretty high inflation, higher than we've had in a while. So prices are going up, not down. Well, so what's happening to demand? It's going down, not up. But it's still true that when prices go down, demand goes up. It's just not the case today. So you use not present perfect, but present continuous sense. It's a subtle change, but it's a necessary change. You'll see a note from me if you put in there present perfect that, hey, this is always true. It's just not true today. Anyway, past circumstances and events don't go here. Don't say that, we went through COVID 2 years ago, or over the last 2 years, we've gone to COVID, or unemployment was reported last month as being so-and-so. Well, so we don't make decisions based on the past. We make decisions based on the lingering effects of events that might still be here. So instead of saying, unemployment has gone down for the last 3 quarters or whatever, you would say unemployment continues to trend downwardly at the last report. Simple. Just phrase things always in the present continuous sense. Future circumstances and events don't go here. Oh, and about the past events, you can say, if there's something happened in the past that left a residual effect, you can talk about the effect. Don't talk about the past thing. Talk about the residual effect that is still present. For example, during COVID-19, people learned how to work from home more than ever before. Well, that's true, but it's also past tense. Say it this way. People currently expect, or more people currently expect, to work from home as they learned how to do during COVID-19. Now you're saying people currently expect something. That's present tense. Word everything in the present tense. The current residual effects of past things are okay. Just make sure you talk about them in the present tense, not what happened, but what is the effect now. For the future, it's similar. You don't talk about things that just might happen in the future. Now, there could be an earthquake in Alabama tomorrow, and that's actually very true. We sit not too far from the New Madrid Fault, which runs up just west of Troy. It's just not a very active fault, but it is active enough that we get these regular little tremors. We don't even feel them. They happen so softly and so rarely. But we could have an earthquake, sure. Would you base decisions on that? Probably not. Experts are not yelling at us that, hey, we're getting ready for a major earthquake now. So, hey, it could happen, but we don't have any evidence that says it's about to happen. If you lived in Los Angeles, scientists are saying in around the San Andreas fault, yeah, they're overdue for a major earthquake. Not good. Would you build a glass factory in Los Angeles? Probably not. You go somewhere where it's geologically stable. Okay, so you would not talk about future possible events. You would talk about the current evidence of an upcoming event. You would say something like, scientists agree that there is sufficient evidence that so-and-so will be the case in the next so-and-so number of years. Now, you always want to remember, don't talk too much about things that are in the distant future, but you can talk about things that you really, if there's evidence that says this is going to be the case within your strategic planning cycle, you probably need to start thinking about now. This is where the whole idea of disaster preparedness, risk avoidance, strategic continuity or business continuity, that's where they come into play. What's the probability of something happening? and what is the average cost? A good example is hurricanes. If you were on the Gulf Coast, the Gulf of Mexico coast, and someone said, you know, you could have an earthquake, a hurricane come ashore right here in the next 2 or 3 years. Well, that's true. But look at the probability. What's the probability of a hurricane coming ashore and impacting you in some way, shape, or form in the next, say, 5 years? Actually, it's reasonably good. You would not want to, you would want to strategically maybe build a little farther inland, maybe build your buildings a slightly different way, because there's evidence that says that it's necessary to do so. You would not adapt for hurricanes in the middle of North Dakota. Now, could you have a storm of hurricane strength in North Dakota? Yeah, they're called them blizzards, but they're cold, but they're not, and they turn, they look on a map, on a globe, they look similar to hurricanes. They're just a little different, but they're not actually hurricanes. The winds can be pretty high. Go to Mount Washington, one of the windiest places in the world. Yeah, they got to deal with wind. They don't have to deal with earthquakes much, I don't think, and they don't have to deal with heat that much. You just, you know, you can't say what this will be the case or this could be the case in the future. You say there's current evidence that says this will be the case, and if it's sufficient and sufficiently soon enough and sufficiently important enough to deal with it, well, then it can make it to your lists. Oh, the one that students will throw out a lot is, we're going to have a recession next year. Well, maybe. It may even be true that it's probable we're going to have a recession next year. But you wouldn't phrase it that way. You would say something like, leading experts agreed that the probability of a recession over the next 3 years is relatively high compared to previous years. True, but you've stated in current tense. They agree that there's sufficient evidence that we will likely have a recession over the next few years. That's it. All right. Make sure that you talk about the current evidence and only relevant future conditions. If you can cover those, they got to be important and they got to be fairly soon within your strategic planning cycle. Then you can talk about them if they're important enough. As a rule, for my students, I doubt seriously, other than maybe the possibility of a recession or such, you probably not going to cover much of that, at least in terms of doing a class project. You have to convince me with strong evidence that it's necessary. All right. So anyway, you make a list, just like it shows in those cells. Each particular phenomenon or circumstance you would list as a single, grammatically correct, complete, take a note here, single, grammatically correct, complete sentence in present continuous tense. That's what goes in these lists. Now, in doing this in the real world, you'd have 2 lists, one favorable, one unfavorable. For my classes, you're going to do one long list and put the favorables at the top and the unfavorables at the bottom. And I'm going to see EF1 through whatever your required number is, and EU1 through whatever the number required is. Use an analytical model to guide your thinking and brainstorming. That's the Porter's model, the Pastel model. You can look online to find out what those are. Most students struggle. They don't struggle with Porter's very much. They do struggle a bit with the Pastel model. And the specific place they struggle is the idea of political versus legal being separate. Politics, because politicians draft and approve legislation, students have trouble separating political and legislated pressures. I want you to think of it a little bit different. Political meaning you scratch my back, I scratch yours, those kinds of things. Politicians may be resistant to the idea of putting a vending machine in a school system lunchroom because they don't want kids to have carbonated drinks. They may be resistant to sugar-sweetened soft drinks or sugar-sweetened drinks. They may be resistant to allowing smoking on secondary school, high school campuses. There may not be any laws against it, but there just may be politically, businesses might find themselves in an unfavorable position when it comes to dealing with politicians. When you think of the legal aspect of the pastel model, I want you to think of the idea of something regulatory. Now, that could be law that's legislated, it could be case law, it could be executive order, and you'll find this a lot in your HR classes, where some of the HR rules are not necessarily passed by Congress, but expressed by the president through executive order. Think regulatory. Some industries regulate themselves. We have regulations in the form of international treaties that get ratified by Congress. When you do business in other countries, it could be the order and demand of a monarch. So we don't necessarily, the law is a little too restrictive for what goes in legal. Think regulatory. These are things in writing that bind a company or bind a person. And that would be what would go there. If you were doing a personal strategic analysis, you might look at what the Bible, the Quran, whatever religious text you use might prohibit you from doing. For example, stealing is almost universally prohibited by most religions. That would be regulatory, because it's, in fact, for folks that are Jewish or Christian, we actually call that the law. But anyway, there's different ways to look at legal, but if you think regulatory, you will not do this or you will do that, it's a lot easier to look at. All right. The nice thing about doing regulatory, you got things like the FDA rules that say on food and drink you have to put the ingredient list with the largest ingredients first. That's not an act of Congress. That's a FDA rule. Or the calorie count and the nutrition matrix that goes on those things. That is by an organization for the government making what they call administrative law. It's regulatory, it's not legislative law. So use the term regulations, call it the Pasteur model instead of the Pastel model, and you'll have a lot less trouble figuring out politics and legislation, politics and legal. The Porter's forces model works really, really, really well. And as long as you're talking about for-profit entities, when you start talking about not for-profit entities, a couple of mention just a couple of quick things. In a not-for-profit, you may not have any competitors. And also, if you're doing something like a consulting company, you may not have any raw material suppliers. If you're what they call an intelligence worker or a knowledge worker, you may not have any suppliers at all. If you're doing strategic planning for your person, there's some stuff Porter's doesn't cover because it's not meant for that. You can cover everything in the Porter's model and think about that stuff, but you need to think also about things like your spiritual life, relationships. Some people would put relationship life and sex life as two different things. Call it familial or family life. You can have lots of different things, lots of different factors on those models to adapt them to whatever situation you're using. I wouldn't necessarily eliminate something. You should at least think about them, but you can add factors if necessary. The external circumstances in the TicTacToe 3x3 matrix, it is necessary that you must use diagnostic tools. Now, I don't require it, again, in certain courses because I just don't have the time, and it's really not necessary. But MBA students, you need to understand how to use those internal and external IFE, EFE matrices. But the reason that we need them is because when you do the analysis matrix and you're numbering EF1, EF2, EF3, whatever those four input factor lists are, it's necessary to be comprehensive, meaning you have as many as you can think. And what those analysis diagnostic tools use, the IFE and the EFE, they help you narrow down the list to about 10 favorable, 10 unfavorable, and again, for the internal, it'd be like 10 better than, 10 worse than. So you have 20 factors total, but it'll also prioritize them so the most important ones float to the top, and the ones that really don't matter go away. Now, this is one of the ways we address the subjectivity of the analysis matrix. In SWOT, whatever the boss says was important was important. And the boss just said, leave this, take this out, leave this, take this out, whatever. But when you do the IFE and the EFE, one person can't do it. It takes a team of people, which is the other reason we don't really do this in the Masters in Management programs, because students have to do this alone. You need a team of people, all who go together and work on their matrices. And the team collectively for part and individually for part rate and weight, or weight and rate the factors, and one person doesn't have much influence subjectively. It's objective in the sense that it's the average of more than one person. It helps eliminate personal bias, C-suite bias from the analysis. So use the diagnostic tools when it's appropriate, when you have time. It'll take, if you're sitting in a room doing it, it'll take 2 days just for that one thing, doing the diagnostics. And that's after everybody comes up with the list of things that are important. If you hit, for my classes, 11 factors favorable, 11 factors unfavorable, I think that's what I require in most of my management courses, then you've got at least the bare minimums. Just remember, they're not weighted. So some of the other diagnostic tools you cannot use. Just remember that they are identical. Opportunities and threats in conversational English are not the same thing. I mean, opportunities now are things that we can do. Threats are things that might happen in the future. Well, that's not the case in this analysis model. In this matrix, favorable and unfavorable are identical. It's just one can be used competitive advantage, and one tends to put pressure on toward competitive disadvantage. That's all. And if you really want to know the definition, hint, hint, students, current external circumstances are things you have no control over that put pressure toward competitive advantage, and the unfavorables, the threats, put pressure toward competitive disadvantage. That's all they are. And yes, you can list a circumstance in both sides. However, for my classes, don't do that. Pick one. If you're going to list one in both sides, it's not recommended, but you technically can, especially in a company with multiple divisions that are in competition with each other in different industries. Like Coca-Cola has soft drinks and energy drinks now, and bottled water. So those bottled water is a direct substitute for a carbonated soft drink. So any upward demand from one is favorable, but it's unfavorable for the substitute. So yeah, you could technically list it. Just make sure that you rephrase when you want to list one way, that's favorable, rephrase it so it's clear why you're saying it's unfavorable in a different situation. That said, we're going to pause here, and there's my contact information again. I'll leave it up for a few seconds. Pause your video if you want it. There it is. Contact me if you have any questions. I'm going to stop. We're going to come back. We're going to go over the internal factors.